eating normally. If you have your protein, you're good because that's for muscle recovery. That's what it's going to, is all towards muscle supporting growth or preventing breakdown. That's what protein's used for. When you go to carbohydrates, it's mostly for like that quick explosive power movements, or like if you're going to go run anything that's really intense, so weightlifting generally is intense regardless of what weights you're moving. You're moving weights. It's intense for the muscle. You're tricking the muscle. It's hard. High intensity running, sprinting, stuff like that, burpees, jumping, anything where you're really using a lot of energy is going to be carbs. And then fats are generally used for like aerobic, steady state. Most fat is burned at rest. So like when you're just chilling, sitting on the couch, you're burning fat for energy because it's like you're not calling on more. You're not asking for more. You're just asking for whatever your body has.
Yeah.
So if you eat a high fat diet, you really want to eat a lot, because when you overeat fats, your body's like, wow, I have a lot of fat. I need to get rid of it. So you can still have carbohydrates. And there's Ben Polkulski. He's a great guy. He used to compete on the Olympia stage. Mm-hmm. So he's a professional bodybuilder. And he'd place like top 5, and he'd use science to back his training, which a lot of them do. But he talks to a lot of doctors and does a lot of unconventional things that aren't really making headline. Like they're not mainstream yet. And so ketogenic diet is one of them, but you can do the ketogenic diet while still having optimum performance. Like you can have carbohydrates on a keto diet and still be technically in a very good metabolic zone for burning fat. You don't necessarily need to go completely off of carbohydrates to still optimize fat burn. Mm-hmm. But you do want to switch to fats and have a lot of fats, because the more fats you have, the easier it'll be to switch into ketosis. So once you have that plentiful amount of fats and cut the carbs low, your body needs to resort to fats.
Yeah.
So usually if you're going to do the switch, you should automatically jump into high fat right away, as opposed to easing into it because you're scared.
Yeah.
Well,
that's one thing. I never eased into it. Like we always, if we're going to do keto, it's like a day. Like it's today, you're done.
Yeah, you got to.
Today is like high fat, low carb, whatever. Mm-hmm. But so my question to you is then, like, would you say that in a normal, so let's say, because can you live in keto? Yeah, I've heard that you're not supposed to.
Yeah,
but you can. Okay, but sometimes
most mainstream doctors will tell you no. Most mainstream doctors will tell you not to take certain, like, don't be careful of how much protein you take. It's linked to kidney failure or kidney disease, or don't take creatine because it's also linked to that. But if you're drinking a ton of water and you're smart and you're not just over consuming supplements, it's a supplement. Yeah. It's not your diet. It's adding to the diet. That's what a supplement is for. If you're eating plenty of protein, you're not going to have kidney damage. If you're not breaking down muscle tissue, the protein may be excessive, so you might not need it. You might just add fat, and that's just not what you want, because it'll just be stored just like carbs would be stored, just like fat will be stored as fat,
So would you recommend then for like a normal diet? So like, let's say like I'm not doing keto, I'm not doing anything, I'm weightlifting, 2 or 3 times a week, but you're not training anything, you're not doing anything crazy, you're not playing a sport, you're not running 8 miles a day. Just a normal average human being goes to work, whatever, tries to hit the gym as much as they want.
Right.
Would you recommend, like, because they say balanced diet, but would you recommend having lower carbs, or like watching your carbs or watching your fats? Like, what intake would you think is more important to watch on like a normal basis?
Well, I mean, of course your goals matter.
For health wise, not for like losing
weight. So if you're going
to
talk, we'll say longevity, because longevity would mean you're going to try to be as healthy as you can, as long as you can. You want to go up until like, I don't know, I want to live till I'm 75, 80, 90, 100. Our generation could luckily get up into the 110, 120 range with like the medicine we had as kids growing up. But I would say longevity purposes, going ketogenic is probably the best bet. When you're over consuming foods, I have a feeling that's when the cancers start to happen, and that's why cancer is so like prominent nowadays, is because people are overeating carbohydrates, and carbohydrates feed cancer from what research has shown. So if carbs are feeding cancer and you're overeating, you're just going to stir up. I mean, you're going to be building cells. When you're growing, you're building cells. So building cells is what's going to cause cancer, because cancer is also going to grow as well. So when you're in a fat state in a ketogenic diet or a lower calorie restrictive diet, usually you'll be better off from cancer and you may live longer. Your just performance may not be as great, which again, performance is a short-lived thing. your prime isn't going to be forever. There'll be a time when it starts to fall off and you can't control that. So I don't know. For longevity purposes, I would say a higher fat diet might be more beneficial, and a lower restricting carbohydrate diet
so
is probably
could you then like not be in keto and not say, okay, like my body isn't in ketosis, like, you know, because I have the ketosis strips too. So like when I do keto, I know like what level I am or whatever, the amount of ketones I have in my body. But if I'm not doing it and I just say, well, yeah, I'm just going to, most of my meals have lower carbs and just stay the higher fats. If my body's not in ketosis, how does that affect me?
So it doesn't mean you're not burning fat. You know, you're still burning fat, but being in ketosis just means you're at a level of ketones that are in the blood, in the urine when you're testing your strip. But if your ketones aren't that high, it doesn't mean you're not burning fat. It just means you're not burning enough fat so that like it's really showing up, you know? Yeah. So you can optimize fat burn, and that's what'll cause you to go into ketosis specifically. But just because you're not like in ketosis doesn't mean you're not burning fat. There's research that says when you're in the morning, cortisol affects your ketosis. So if you test yourself in the morning and you're like, oh shit, why am I not in ketosis? You may be, but cortisol is spiked and that'll blunt the effect. Really? So it may just show up that you're not in ketosis when you may still be in fact in ketosis.
That's funny because I have noticed that sometimes because I try to test myself at the same time, but sometimes like just work or whatever doesn't let you.
I think if you do it multiple times in a day, see that, because in the morning you may not be as good as you are later in the afternoon because of cortisol. And everybody knows cortisol is highest in the morning.
Yeah.
That's when most heart attacks happen. That's when once that stress level goes up.
What is cortisol?
Cortisol is what wakes you up. I mean, cortisol is the stress hormone.
Oh, okay.
So it'll wake you up in the morning, and that's why you get going, because you have that cortisol stressed you out. So now you're up and you're awake, and that's why you're awake.
That's why I hate the mornings, because
you may have low cortisol.
Yeah, maybe, dude.
You may have low cortisol if you don't want to get up. Getting up is a good reaction because that's what's supposed to happen.